In 1905, Navajo riders crossed the desert of Tessacod Canyon. The landscape was dry, almost lifeless. Even so, they moved in single file, alert to the land's signs. Each hoofbeat cut through the silence and pushed the group forward. Through dust and heat, they kept their course, move ahead, protect the community, and clear the way for what was to come. Among the figures of the Old West, Billy the Kid stands out. Born in New York in 1859, he moved with his family to New Mexico and was orphaned. At 14, he left home and plunged into stealing horses and cattle. He broke out of jail twice until he fell under Sheriff Pat Garrett's gunfire in 1881. His short life turned into legend in books, movies, and songs. A boatman steers alone down the Colorado, the wide river that cuts across North America. He pilots a wooden hull, sail raised on the mast. The scene, shot in 1871, frames the Black Canyon, a narrow corridor where the water bends the rock. There, sheer walls rise out of the Arizona desert and guide the route like ancient walls. Silence follows every move. In 1905, a photograph taken in New Mexico shows Kohit Songwi, a young Tiwa woman, in front of a scene that crosses time. The framing reveals more than a portrait, a slice of her daily life and her people's heritage. In ceremonial attire, she becomes a bridge between past and present, reminding us that tradition stays alive with each generation. In 1906, at the Turkey Track, one of the big cattle outfits in the Texas Panhandle, 4 men turned a rivalry into a game. It was called Mumble Peg. Each one threw a pocket knife into the ground, trying to pull off a series of tricky moves. Losing came with a price, pulling a peg out with your teeth, while winning earned bragging rights and stories for days. In the picture are Paiute people, inhabitants of the Great Basin, the arid region between the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada. The shot is from 1872 near Cedar in Utah. The Paiute belong to the western branch of the Numic languages, also present among the Mono and Kauai peoples. The scene hints at a slice of desert life, where language weaves bonds. In the 1910s, a photograph froze in time a family of the Taos Pueblo people in New Mexico. More than faces, it revealed a moment of their everyday life and the culture that sustains them. Wearing traditional clothing, they affirm the continuity of their roots and the strength of the practices that shape their lives and will keep guiding the next generations. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. In the 19th century, 2 Germans who migrated to the United States, Henry Miller and Charles Lux, teamed up after working as butchers in San Francisco. They saw a chance to grow. They moved into raising and slaughtering cattle and invested in farming and irrigation. In 1858, they founded Miller and Lux, which became the country's biggest meat producer and canner. In Green River, Wyoming, 2 rock formations dominate the view. Known as the Twin Buttes, they made history when William Henry Jackson photographed them in 1872 during his geological expedition. Since then, they've guided eyes and routes, a sure point on the map for locals and travelers crossing the area. On the desert horizon, they mark memory and point the way. In an 1890 photograph, Zuche, called Mrs. Minnie, appears in the Pueblo of Laguna community in New Mexico. The portrait records her presence and shows traces of her daily life and the living tradition pulsing there, in a land in flux. It's an invitation to remember that history and recognize the culture that supported generations in the desert. 19th century shotguns had long barrels, between 28 and 32 inches, 71 to 81 centimeters, which improved accuracy and range. One record helps picture it. In a photo of the guards for the Astoria Express Company in Oregon, around 1880, you see the era's standard, elongated guns that were part of everyday transport and protection. In 1867, Clarence King brought together scientists and technicians to map the West. The mission, known as the Geological Exploration of the 40th Parallel, grew out of a government plan, follow the path of the future Union Pacific, and, step by step, reveal the resources underground. It was science in the service of railroad expansion and a country on the move. In 1899, a photograph recorded a man of the Pueblo Nation named Cancao. In the portrait, he appears as a bridge between past and future, offering a glimpse of his people's customs at the turn of the century. Wearing ceremonial attire, his posture affirms the continuity of a way of life that endures across generations. In the image, collective memory takes shape. In 1888, in Pueblo, Colorado, 2 young men pose for the camera. Hats, vests, and boots give away the world of Western hunters. The scene, calm and tense, shows them with Winchester 1886 rifles, a symbol of a time when the frontier set the pace. It's a portrait of everyday grit caught in the dust, a frozen moment that speaks to ambition, risk, and fate. In 1867, Timothy H. O'Sullivan captured a striking view at Pyramid Lake in Nevada. The salty lake is a remnant of ancient Lake Lahontan, which once covered much of the west of the state. There, tufa formations emerge, limestone shaped by mineral deposits from hot springs and high pH waters, visible clues to a deep geological past. The image invites us to cross time. We see a young woman from a Native American people, captured in the 19th century. Her gaze, along with the details of her clothing and the setting, opens a window onto routines, beliefs, and community bonds. In this way, the photograph becomes testimony and a clue to how these societies lived and recognized themselves then. Donaldina Cameron traded a quiet life for a dangerous mission. Starting in 1895, she followed the dark trails of trafficking networks that brought Chinese girls to the United States. She went into brothels, busted schemes, and freed victims. She stuck with it until retirement, facing criminals and creating protection routes that saved countless lives. In 1873, a photograph records Canyon to Chelly in Arizona and shows a camp called Camp Beauty. Among canvas tents and what looks like a cabin, the group shelters at the bottom of the valley. Around them, rock formations rise like towers, composing the backdrop that frames the makeshift life of that moment. The image suggests a pause, travel, and observation. In the scene, two young Apache women from Arizona work side by side. Dry fibers slide between their fingers as the shape of the baskets appears, coil after coil. The rhythm of the motion guides a silent conversation with those who came before. Each weave carries memory, livelihood, and belonging, keeping alive a technique taught from generation to generation. In the image, there's a cowboy who may have set out from Caldwell, Kansas. He carries a rifle and a revolver. The open road calls for caution, wild animals, thieves, and nights with no shelter. Between pastures and dust, he drives the herd, eyes on the horizon. Every stop is short. The journey stays long, driven by the goal of bringing the whole herd in. The Zuni lived in western New Mexico. In the 17th century, the Spanish built a church there to convert them. Known as the Old Mission, it was abandoned after the rebellion that drove the invaders out. The 1873 photo shows its ruins, surrounded by stone houses on the central plaza of Hawiku, where the village went on with daily life. In the photo, a Pawnee woman is portrayed in Genoa, Nebraska. Her portrait shows her people's culture present in that place and suggests paths of movement and belonging. In her gaze and adornments, you can sense the link to tradition, signs of how collective memory moves through places and keeps shaping identities. Built in 1881, the Tabor Opera House shows its quiet strength at first glance. 3 stories set on brick walls 16 inches thick. The structure has lasted through generations without losing steam. Today, anyone who visits can see from act to act how the house keeps both charm and purpose, tying together memory, stage, and city. It's a scene from the settling of the American West. The crew of the boat, Picture, pauses the journey of the expedition led by Lieutenant George Wheeler. The mission was to map and study the Colorado River and its tributaries. Among them is Timothy O'Sullivan, the photographer who documented the landscapes and people they met along the way. In images that helped tell that crossing, an Apache warrior rests, bow and arrows within reach. The scene, calm and steady, suggests more than rest. It shows symbols that hold memory, knowledge, and defense. What he carries defines who he is and how he lives. In that quiet presence, the Apache people's connection to their warrior practices echoes, foundations of their history and their continuity today. On October 17, 1906, the theater in Deadwood was packed. Among the performers, Charles Chapin noted in his diary the surprise. The crowd was buzzing and reflected the boom of the mining town. Gold from the Black Hills had created fortunes. Nights there ran free, and the audience spent big as if every show were one more chance to celebrate. In 1872, a group of explorers reached Browns Park, a mountainous, isolated enclave in Colorado. Faced with rivers, lakes, and woods, they saw a refuge and an open-air lab. They decided to stay a few more days. They would rest from the road and record plants and animals, mapping, along trails and riverbanks, what the landscape revealed little by little. A young Kiowa woman appears in traditional dress. What she wears isn't just clothing, it's memory in motion. From patterns to beads, every element holds meanings, stories, and names of ancestors. Her appearance links present and origin, preserves community values, and keeps alive the stories that still echo among her people. It's passed down from generation to generation. In the early days of cowboy music on film, Roy Rogers shows up on screen in shirts custom made by Nathan Turk. The tailor, a Russian immigrant based in Los Angeles, specialized in Western-inspired pieces for stars of stage and screen. In the 1940s, he designed every shirt Rogers wore in his movies. Shoshone Falls, on the Snake River in southern Idaho, impresses with its scale. A 65-meter drop, 14 higher than Niagara Falls, and almost 300 meters wide. The present landscape was born about 14,000 years ago, when glacial Lake Bonneville overflowed, swept the valley, and carved the canyon the Snake still runs through today. It's a striking lookout in the American West. In 1916, on the Rosebud Reservation, the leader Black Bull emerged. His voice carried beyond the reservation's borders and mobilized the Sioux community. With firm choices and an eye on the future, he became a reference for wisdom and courage. Around him, life on Rosebud took shape, and his legacy kept echoing beyond the prairies. Vera McGinnis and Earl Simpson met at the Rodeo, got married, and shared the arenas for a while. The grind of travel and competition, though, couldn't hold the partnership together off stage. They split and went their separate ways. Vera kept competing, made her name in relay races and riding, and turned the arena into her own road forward. In 1871, an explorer sat on a rock on the bank of the Colorado River. He watched the current and the walls rising around him. He was in Iceberg Canyon, a wild stretch between Arizona and Nevada. There, as part of a team of scientists, he moved through land not yet mapped, recording what he saw and trying to understand that gorge. In the early 1900s, a group of cowboys worked the Three Seas Ranch near Duncan, Arizona. One sunny morning around 1902, they paused their chores and gathered for a simple lunch outdoors. Between laughs and talk, one name from that scene was recorded: William McDonald. The break was brief before they went back to handling cattle. In the old image, a wagon carries Timothy O'Sullivan's Dark Room, a name tied to records of the Civil War and the Old West. 4 mules pulled the vehicle as they crossed the dry ground of Carson Sink, a closed basin in the Carson Desert, Nevada. There, road, dust, and craft come together to create photographs that outlived their time. At the start of the 20th century, in the area that's now Arizona and California, 3 young Kemehuevi grew up between deserts and rivers. More than children, they were the daily bridge between their people and the land. They looked after the paths, learned the cycles of hunting and harvesting, and in doing so, kept alive the memory that sustained the community's identity. In the image captured by Solomon Butcher, we see a homesteader family in front of their sod house in Custer County, Nebraska. These homes, built with blocks of prairie turf, were a common solution on the Great Plains. From the 19th century into the early 20th, they sheltered folks who came to put down roots in that land. After the silver strikes of the Comstock Lode, the mining community of Gold Hill sprang up next to Virginia City. Smaller but lively, it reached about 8,000 residents between 1868 and 1888. At its peak, mines like Yellow Jacket, Crown Point, and Belcher each paid out more than $10 million in dividends, cementing its brief prosperity. In the second half of the 19th century, the American West opened to expeditions and maps. In Black Canyon, where the Colorado River cuts through the rock of what was then the Nevada Territory, a canoe rests on the bank, ready to launch. The scene was recorded in 1871 by Timothy O'Sullivan, a photographer who shot the Civil War and joined geological surveys across the country. At the Illinois mine in Nevada, gold extraction used a clever wooden incline built in 1871 in the Pahranagat area. 2 rails ran up to the top, where a pulley controlled the motion. That way, the loaded car would go up while another came down, a continuous back and forth that sped up the work and kept the ore flowing. Around 1882, on the Great Plains of North America, an Arapaho mother poses beside her son. The image records the daily life and bonds of a community that has lived in the region for generations. Photographer William Alma captures the moment with precision, inviting the eye to notice gestures, objects, and the quiet that shapes life in that land. In Arizona, Fort Apache was a U.S. Army post from 1870 to 1922. In 1903, the 5th Cavalry paraded there, showing organization and maneuvering power. That day, the public walked along Officers' Row, the line of officers' houses. They're the only buildings that preserve the fort's original look, now that it's decommissioned. Since then, they've become the place's living memory. In 1867, the photographer O'Sullivan reached Virginia City, Nevada, determined to document the Savage and Gould and Curry mines tied to the Comstock Lode, a silver powerhouse. To capture the miners' routine, he went down about 300 meters underground, facing nearly dark tunnels to record the hidden work at the bottom of the mine. In 1875, 4 Pawnee brothers, known for their music, crossed time through a photograph. The image was made by William Henry Jackson, whose lens was dedicated to documenting the life and heritage of indigenous nations. In this image, the brothers aren't just posing. They affirm presence, memory, and culture in a portrait that still speaks to us. From high above Canyon to Chelly, the 1873 photo reveals a sacred land lived in by native peoples for generations. The red-stained rock walls snake in curves and cracks that run for miles. In the distance, the green along the creek cuts the canyon floor, creating a contrast that leads the eye through the landscape. In the image, we see General George A. Custer and Elizabeth, figures who left a mark on U.S. history. At the door of the tent that served as their home and headquarters, they pose side by side. The couple's gaze suggests plans and memories. The scene sums up the frontier campaigns, a mobile life, quick decisions, and the company of a gray greyhound, a breed loved by officers. A young mother from an indigenous nation holds her baby to her chest, in a record from the early 20th century. Her steady gaze meets the camera while her traditional clothing shows her community's art. In hands, fabric, and quiet, the scene connects affection and collective memory, showing how identity passes from generation to generation in the image. In San Antonio, nights got their flavor at the Chili Queen's stalls in Military Plaza. There, chili con carne, meat and peppers, brought people together under the open sky. The tradition bloomed at the end of the 19th century, echoing memories from when Texas was still under Mexican influence before it became its own republic, and it turned into a city symbol. In 1872, north of the Colorado Plateau, the course of a river that runs through the American Southwest opened a way through rocks and canyons. Toward evening, the cliffs rose like guardians of the valley. With every step, the light shifted, revealing cracks, curves, and plateaus, and inviting the eye to move on, where the landscape stitched together water, stone, and time. In 1838, in Maine, Samuel Knight was born. As a young man, the call of the gold rush took him to California. There, he swapped easy promises for skilled work. He built mills that crushed ore from the mines. While the country burned in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865, he stayed in the West, shaping his trade and his life far from the battlefields. In 1875, the sun crossed the Great Basin as the Paiute community gathered for an outdoor portrait. Under the generous canopy of a tree, maybe at Cottonwood Springs, Nevada, in Washoe County, they lined up in 3 rows. Final adjustments, a call from the photographer, and faces opened into smiles that crossed time. Enslaved in Arkansas in 1849, Ned Huddleston made his way through the 19th century to Wyoming, where he dropped that name and became Isam Dart. He also went by Black Fox, Tan Mex, and Calico Cowboy. Crossing borders, he worked as a cook, rodeo clown, rider, and horsebreaker, while getting mixed up in cattle and horse theft in Mexico and Texas, earning an outlaw's reputation. In 1872, Utah was the stage for a rare meeting of the landscape. After millions of years of wind and water at work, two big canyons pushed forward until they touched. The Green and the Yampa, carried by the flow of the Green River, met at the point where the bed split, joining paths and reshaping the scenery of the American West, a show of nature. The Nez Perce lived along the Snake River in areas that are now northeastern Oregon, southeastern Washington, and central Idaho. Pressed by the U.S. Army, they resisted. Chief Joseph led the flight north toward Montana, near Canada. On October 5, 1877, with no way out, he surrendered to Oliver Howard and Nelson A. to save lives. Almost a century and a half ago, the photographer O'Sullivan stumbled on an unexpected trace, the mark of someone who had been there 150 years earlier. On the sandstone of Inscription Rock in New Mexico, a Spanish inscription dated 1726 records the passage of Ensign Don Joseph de Paiva Vasconcelos on February 18th, a clue that links two travelers across time. In the first years of the 20th century, in the Arizona desert, a Hopi mother and her daughter lived their lives. Among dunes and plateaus, their daily rhythm followed the village's pulse. Rituals, harvests, arts, and stories told by the fire. With each gesture, the Southwest's heritage pulsed, uniting generations and shaping who they were and how they walked the world. With the expansion of the fur trade in the 19th century, hunters looked for reliable guns. Jacob "Jake" Hawken, born in Maryland and trained by his father in gunsmithing, moved to St. Louis. In 1825, he opened a shop with his brother Samuel, and from there came the Hawken rifle, a muzzleloader loaded from the front, built tough and safe to operate. Calling themselves the People, the Navajo were an indigenous nation of North America. Their history runs through deserts. They spoke a language of the Athabascan family and belonged to the culture of the Southwest. They migrated from the north and settled on a broad plateau that spans Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, the largest native reservation in the United States. Between 1896 and 1899, the Klondike in Canada went through a gold rush. The discovery, made on August 16, 1896 by local miners, spread worldwide after word reached Seattle and San Francisco the next year. About 100,000 people set out for the Yukon, crossing Alaska on brutal trails. Many fell short or arrived to find no gold. In 1873, the White House ruins appear in Canyon de Chelly, Arizona, the former home of the Pueblo, Anasazi, who built cliff dwellings more than 5 centuries earlier. In the background, groups of men spread out across the nook and the valley, posing on structures and rubble, while ropes connect them and trace a route between heights and ground on a safe path. In the 19th century Rockies, John Johnson became known as the Liver Eater. After his wife died in a crow attack, he swore revenge. He hunted his enemies with strength and cunning, ripping out and eating the livers of those he killed. Fear spread among the Crow, and fur trappers made him a legend there. In 1867, an expedition went down the Truckee River that runs through Nevada. Leading the way, the boat Nettie took the team through rapids and winding stretches. The mission was to map the waterway, test its navigability, and identify routes in the western part of the state, opening the way for future commercial links. The data collected would guide decision-makers. Chief Peaches, leader of the Little Bone Reserve tied to the Sakime First Nation near Grenfell in Canada, was a central voice of the Cree community. His work goes back to 1884, a decisive time for the First Nations, when alliances, conflicts, and negotiations with European colonizers shaped paths and marked the future of the lands and local peoples. In 1868, Timothy O'Sullivan captured a scene that sums up Nevada's silver fever, a worker hauling an iron cart stacked with ore. The material came from the mines of the Savage Works, which tapped the big deposit at Virginia City. The photo is part of a series that shows the daily grind miners faced back then. Seen from this hill, Santa Fe seemed to tell its 17th century origins under Spanish colonization. In 1873, already the capital of New Mexico, it kept its colonial feel. Narrow streets, adobe houses, stone temples. Between memory and change, the city moved forward without losing the marks that shaped it, without giving up what made it. Around 1902, historical records highlight Geronimo, leader of the Chiricahua Apache. More than a name in documents, he became a turning point. His actions and choices lit up the Southwest's history and opened the way for a closer reading of native cultures. By following his steps, we better understand the strength and continuity of that legacy. From the stages of the Old West to frontier arenas, the style of cowboy shirts was born. Shows and rodeos drew cowboys and crowds who celebrated skill and courage. To shine, bold fabrics and embroidery came in, telling the story, trade, and identity of those who lived among cattle, dust, and ropes. A look made for the spotlight that became an unforgettable symbol. In 1871, Maimon, a Mojave man, became a guide and translator for explorers who spent months crossing the Colorado country. With John Wesley Powell's team, he joined a scientific expedition that mapped rivers, trails, and local memories, bringing knowledge together and recording voices that might have been lost without his mediation. In 1915, in the American Southwest, a Navajo woman approached a stream to fetch water. The gesture, simple and essential, sustained her household and strengthened village bonds. In that everyday moment, memory and resilience intertwined, showing how indigenous nations kept life going amid the pressures of that period. Trail Boss, a painted bronze sculpture created in 1993 by Texan Robert Summers, portrays the lead rider of a 19th century cattle drive. Set up in Ogallala in southwestern Nebraska, an old stop on the Western Trail, it honors cowboys and others who died in the area, buried at Boot Hill. A plaque sums up the story. From its high perch, the piece looks out over the town. Alta City sprang up in the 19th century when silver miners from the Emma, Flagstaff, and neighboring mines settled in Little Cottonwood Valley. The Emma got famous for its ore grade and in 1871 was sold for a large sum to British investors. Soon the illusion collapsed. It was a fraud. The episode strained relations between the U.S. and Great Britain and ended in a congressional investigation. Around 1900, Carl Wernz recorded in Michongnovi, Arizona, the portrait of a young Hopi woman. The framing invites you to look closely at a daily life that spans generations. The ceremonial clothes, steady gaze, and stone settings stitched together past and present, suggesting the strength with which the Hopi people hold on to their ways of life and pass on their memory. In 1871, Timothy O'Sullivan photographed in Arizona the rock formation known as Cathedral Mesa. In the scene, dry ground stretches as far as the eye can see, while the Colorado River draws a winding path in the distance. Under the sun, the mesa shows red tones and firm edges, creating a dialogue between mineral hardness and water in motion. In 1905, a photograph shows the Ute chief Buckskin Charlie displaying a peace medal. The object, given by the U.S. government, is a reminder of a time of negotiations between indigenous leaders and federal authorities. More than an ornament, it signals a decisive chapter in relations between native peoples and the state, when dialogue and tension walked side by side. A young Chiricahua Apache woman appears in her people's attire. Fabrics form patterns and adornments that tell stories, while each accessory holds its own meaning. It isn't just clothing. It's living memory, identity, and ritual, a link with the ancestors. By wearing it, she carries her people's presence and affirms in her own body the continuity of their tradition. In 1885, in the wide lands of the White Mountain, an Apache scout named Penaltish, also known as Zoc, earned respect. He moved silently along dry paths, read signs others couldn't see, and guided travelers safely. Among dunes and rocks, his precise vision made the difference and supported the community that trusted him.